A force of 100,000 soldiers stands at the base of a mountain and a bunch of rolling hills on the outskirts of Atlanta, doubling the size of their enemy. Confederate forces are behind trenches, 50,000 strong. The end result, casualties on the Union side are 3-1. Today, we're at Kennesaw Mountain. June 27th, 1864. Sherman faces Johnson in a little-known spot in Georgia on the outskirts of Atlanta. That place is called Kennesaw Mountain. And the events that unfold here will echo in time as one of the deadliest conflicts to happen in the Atlanta area, and a Confederate victory. Kennesaw Mountain National Battlefield is a huge park. There are a lot of different components here at this battlefield. On one end, it's covered in entrenchments that were placed here back during that campaign. On the other end, a large mountain that you can climb up. And we decided to focus in on one particular fight that happened out here. It best represents the toughness of that time. That's Cheatham Hill. And much like Franklin, this battlefield is extremely large, and it's split up by subdivisions, apartment complexes, Walmart, a lot of large businesses out here that take up a vast majority of the actual battlefield itself. But they have preserved a very good portion of it, and they've stretched out a huge trail that you can take that still goes into a lot of wooded areas and lots, and preserve some of the more important spots, if you will. On June 27th of 1864, the main assault, the first initial wave that starts to happens out here at Kennesaw Mountain. Here at Cheatham Hill, the frontal assault that happens here turns into a huge debacle for the Union Army. One that will never be forgotten by those men as long as they lived. And the death rate and casualty rate was vastly different on the different sides. The Union soldiers, 3,000 casualties. The Confederate soldiers, 1,000 casualties. That's a pretty big deal when we're talking about combat in any one zone. This location is definitely a spot that deserves a video about just this spot. Now, General Thomas has made his mind up. He's going to send his men across this field, McCook in particular, and he's going to run them straight up that hill and attack the heavily fortified positions out here at Cheatham Hill. He's going to end up hitting Cleburne's men, primarily. But the assault's going to fail. He thinks that the assault over here is going to be a success because they're only 400 yards apart. And that's one of the primary things that he focuses on while he's out here, is how close the forces are to each other. So when he sends in this division to fight, he doesn't realize it, but he's sending them to slaughter, because as they come across that field, there are zigzag patterns of artillery positions all over this area, and the Union soldiers are going to have to deal with that. They start the fight out here, however, with about a quarter hour worth of artillery barrage on these positions to try to weaken them. Kennesaw Mountain, one of the best features out here, comes from Cheatham Hill itself. This is one of the places here in Georgia that you can go to, and you can actually see the zigzag patterns of the trenches. They were used in 1864 for trench warfare during the American Civil War. Now, up in Virginia, we have similar trenches that are tucked away in wooded areas where a lot of people don't often visit. But one of the more visited places up there that's kind of similar to this is Cold Harbor. At this point in time during the war, trench warfare was the name of the game. Now you can see how the fortification goes out this way, and then going back in this direction here are more lines of the fortification. If you want to see just how close these Union soldiers got to the works of the Confederate soldiers out here at Cheatham Hill, that is a monument right there to C.H. Coffey, a sergeant with Indiana. He got to that point before being mortally wounded. Right there is the breastworks. That's about as close as it gets. Now, a lot of those Union soldiers in those divisions came up here and got within distance of the parapet, and some of them right at the parapet, before having to drop to the ground and taking cover and heading back down this hill. Now we're going down the Cheatham Hill here, and telling the story kind of as we go down, because here in a minute we're going to go up through the swampy bottom and then up Cheatham Hill and give you an idea of what the terrain looks like as we're moving along. Now the men that are out here belong to General Thomas, and the corps that he sends in is the 4th Corps, Brigadier General John Newton, and he has Mitchell and McCook out here with him as well. That's what's facing these Confederates that are up on the hill. It's a large body of men headed in this direction, but the terrain isn't as simple as just 400 yards like Thomas thinks. A couple of these divisions, Mitchell and McCook, are facing swampy bottom areas that they have to maneuver their men through. And then once they get through that type of terrain, they come out to an open and cleared field that's at the bottom of a large hill where the Confederate cannons are concealed and they're facing straight down towards them. So it's a deadly assault that they're going to have to make here. And it's going to take a lot of bodies piling up in order to try to take this hill. Now I'm in that low-lying area that we were talking about earlier, the area that was swampy at the time that the Federals had to march through here. And facing them on the other side is Claiborne. Pat Claiborne, Brigadier General George Maney. And at 8 a.m., the Federal artillery on the other position over this hill opens up and starts firing on the Confederate position. And it's about 15 to 25 minutes worth of artillery being fired on them, hoping to soften the position up before the Federals are given the go-ahead to march off into their fate. Now, when you come out here to the position at Cheatham Hill today, you're going to see clear open fields and then a whole bunch of woodlots. You'll have to understand as you're walking around out here that back during the battle, a lot of the woodlots were not in the same places that they are today. And if there were any trees, the artillery made sure to cut those trees down, because the fight that happened out here riddled trees with bullets and cannonball canister, grape shot and other things. And those trees were basically gnawed down like toothpicks. And sometimes those trees would fall over on top of soldiers that were trying to go through the areas. So this land looked vastly different. There's photographs that exist out there of Kennesaw Mountain before and after the battle took place. And the landscape is just devastated by war. There's mounds of dirt everywhere, chopped down trees, destroyed buildings. This place was a vast wasteland during the Battle of Kennesaw Mountain. just like Pigeon Hill, which is about 2 miles in that direction. When the Federals came through this swampy bottom land here and out towards the position that they needed to go to, they end up overrunning skirmishers, and they take a whole bunch of them hostage and captive and send them off to prisoner of war camps. But that's about as victorious as it got on the 27th for them, because once they passed the skirmish lines, they had to deal with the main lines that were heavily entrenched. They were fortified. The cannons in some places were hidden by brush, and the abatis that they had placed up there was so high that a man could literally stand behind it and fire at you and hand his weapon back to another man who would then load it while he was firing the other weapon that was handed to him. They fired so hot from that position on that hill up there that the guns became so hot that a lot of the soldiers here talked about their rifle barrels being so hot that they could not fire another round without burning their hands. And so they were using cloth and anything they could get their hands on to try to keep their hands from being scorched while firing their weapons down at the Federals coming uphill. I'm going downhill from the position of where the artillery was placed for the Federals. And here in a minute, I'm going to be in the exact position where McCook's men stepped off to go towards Cheatham Hill. And I'm going to flip the camera around and let you take a look at what it would have looked like roughly going through this location when you see the low-lying area coming out of the tree clearing, the long open field, and then the daunting task that's going to be before you as a soldier out here. It's something to behold. And if you ever get a chance to get out to Kennesaw, I highly suggest you get over to Cheatham Hill and check this place out, even if it's the only stop that you make out here. In the position directly behind me here, there's a marker, and it marks roughly where Dan McCook lined his men off and got them prepared to go into battle, and they stepped off from this position towards Cheatham Hill in that direction. This is where he uttered those famous words, Horatio, and he spoke eloquently before going into this battle. Harker himself said before going into this battle on June 27th that he didn't expect to come out of this battle alive. There were many people that died out here at Kennesaw during the Battle of Kennesaw. The total casualty count was 4,000 casualties. 3,000 of those were Union, 1,000 Confederate. Patrick Claiborne himself, up here in Cheatham Hill, expects after the battle's over with that he only lost about 11 men. So the position is a very good position for the Confederates and terrible for Federals. On that day, McCook would get his men lined up over here in this position, and they're facing off in this direction right out here. And we're coming up to the monument that's placed that shows exactly where they were when they were stepping off to go into the fight at Cheatham Hill. I'm in McCook's position right now. I'm going to flip this camera around and we're going to walk through the location where those soldiers had to go to take that hill. And just pay attention to the terrain as I'm going through there. How it gets very low, it's wet down at the bottom, and then when we come out, look at that hill that's in front of you and what you're going to have to do under fire. Now, as we're coming around this position here, the men would have already been lined up in a straight line. Straight line, shoulder to shoulder, for linear assault on this hill. And as they come down through here, in June of 1864, this land down here was considered swampland, and it's a lot marshier than it is today. The streams out here are not as wet. As you can see, we have a couple of small bridges out here in place for us to go across. They're not going to be taking bridges. They're going to be going down those embankments and back up, and then reforming their lines just on the other side of both of these streams that are down here to get back into battle formation. Now that McCook's reestablished his lines, he has another small stream ahead of him here. Some more swampland that he's about to have to go through. And then he comes out of this clearing. Mind you, the entire time, Confederates can see what's going on down here. And they're firing. They haven't stopped firing. They're just not exactly hitting target as much as they're going to when these guys step out here and end up at the base of this hill. As you come out of this tree line, you can see right where your enemy is going to be. Now McCook's men's got to go up this hill and go towards the parapets just at the top up there. They have cannon fire coming from all directions at them, and some of the hardest fighting men are at the top there, well protected by entrenchments as they're marching up this hill trying to make their way to the top. Well, I made it to the top of Cheatham Hill, but not without a little bit of sweat equity to get here. Just like this morning at the top of Kennesaw Mountain, it's hot, it's humid, and it's one hill after another out here. But put yourself in the position of those soldiers. They're probably hungry, they're probably tired, they don't have very good clothes on, heavy wool, 15-pound musket, and they're doing the exact same thing I'm doing under duress, under combat. I have a lot of respect for those soldiers that fought out here at Kennesaw. So McCook gets himself right up here to this position. And just past this monument here is where McCook ends up falling, mortally wounded in this battle for Cheatham Hill. He gets all the way up to the parapet, turns around and yells at his men and tries to encourage them to continue forward. He's shot right in the chest. Right after he is wounded, he's carried off the field and he's taken back to Ohio. Then 5 days later, McCook would end up dying as a result of his wounds. Now, Brigadier General Harker rides into position just in front of the works. And he yells, "Forward, men, take those works." And just as the young 26-year-old Brigadier General yells that, he's hit. He's shot, struck in the arm and struck in the chest. And he falls from his horse. The white horse falls to the side. Brigadier General Harker is taken back to his lines. And at 1 p.m., the young man dies as a result of his wounds there in front of those works at Cheatham Hill. Now, most of the Federals under Newton, they don't get as close as McCook does. McCook's right on top of the parapet when he's shot down. Most of them are hunkered down here in the fields because that clearing that we were just at, that clearing's a lot wider back then than it is today. And if you look when you're walking on this trail, everywhere around you is nothing but a hill going up in that direction. These men get as close as they can, and with the cannon fire mowing them down left and right, they have to bury themselves to the ground as close as they can to keep themselves from being killed. That's why so many officers went down out here at the lead of their element. By about 10:30, the fight here is over for Newton. Shortly after the fighting is over, one of the Confederate leaders decides that he's going to call a truce. And his reasoning behind that truce is he wants to get the men that are out there on the fields, allow the Federals to come get their wounded and bury them. But some also say the reason why is because that brush fire that's burning the abatis is weakening his position. So it's not exactly completely selfless. He wants to continue to fortify his position. In the end here, we have 34,000 soldiers engaged in the fight. There's a total of 4,000 casualties for the Battle of Kennesaw. But the Battle of Cheatham Hill would be the worst portion of this, in my opinion. The fight out here is terrible. And even considering everything, there's even elements to it that kind of remind you of the wilderness, including the fire, where men in the woods behind me here actually burned alive. Well, I hope you enjoyed the tour out here at Kennesaw at Cheatham Hill. And it's been one heck of a trip. So we'll get these videos uploaded as soon as we can. Until next time, this is History with Waffles.